Well, good evening, everybody. How are you? This is Mark Vines, and you're listening to The Mark Vines Show. I appreciate you listening, and this is where we do not sugarcoat things. We keep it real, and we do not live in that world of unicorns and Skittles and rainbows, because we are definitely living in a real world these days, are we not? I just cannot believe the types of things that have happened over the last few months. It's stunning. First, it was COVID-19, then it was the economy, then we are now dealing with all kinds of upheaval in the public. And my former profession, law enforcement, is just taking a hell of a beating, is it not? Now, I'm not justifying many of the actions that have taken. We know about the crimes that have been committed. I've talked about that in previous podcasts. But I'm going to address some issues tonight because this idea of the use of deadly force has come up in a number of forums, Facebook, Twitter, lots of different forums, but also to include LinkedIn, which is amazing to me because LinkedIn is supposed to be for professional networking, but it has increasingly gotten political and the attacks are just rampant. And I've even made some comments regarding the use of force and have just been attacked relentlessly. And I want to address this because this is an area that has to be addressed because the general public now is chiming in on opinions regarding the use of force, and they don't understand the training that takes place with police forces. And I want to cover that here today. Now, law enforcement is really the only profession where people watch videos over and over and over and armchair quarterback and analyze the actions of an officer and then chime in with an opinion as though they know what the heck they're talking about, and they don't. This is the only profession that it happens in. Could you imagine being a neurosurgeon, a heart surgeon, a brain surgeon, or anybody else, and somebody coming in and making a video of an operation that you did, posting it worldwide, and then everybody having an opinion on the work that you did? You wouldn't appreciate it. In fact, you'd probably sit back and say, well, if you want to go to 8 years of college and become a medical doctor and do the work that I do, and then comment on the work that I do without having any training whatsoever, knock yourself out. I'm thinking you wouldn't appreciate that very much. And I know that myself and a lot of people in law enforcement don't appreciate that either. You have to understand that when you look at a video of a shooting that's taken place, a tasing incident, or the use of force, that officer is making that decision in a split second, and often times. They don't have the luxury of sitting back in their living room and watching it and analyzing it, maybe getting different angles, reading reports of interviews, assessing all of the data that's collected, maybe even looking at a report that was done by investigators after the fact. No, they don't have that decision. That decision is made right on the spot, split second. You have to understand, oftentimes you're just drenched in adrenaline. You've maybe been in a fight, maybe you've been in a car chase, maybe you've been in a foot chase. Who knows? But you are just ramped up with adrenaline. And then you have to make that split-second decision. Maybe this is at night and things aren't as clear as they are on a video that the public may have seen. So I think what has happened in Atlanta is what I just described. If you go and you look at the video that took place, or the video that was taken, rather, in that particular incident, and look what happened. You have an individual that is passed out in a vehicle. He's passed out. He's inebriated. The officers respond after being called to the situation. They get there. They pull the guy out. He fails a sobriety test, and then they get ready to take him into custody, and then a fight breaks out. A fight ensues. I actually did not see the very first part of that video until just recently. I did not realize that they had gone hands-on with the guy, that he fought. He took them both to the ground, and it was a pretty tough fight. If you have not seen that video, I recommend that you go out and check it out. And I've been in fights like that. You may recall that I was a Metropolitan D.C. police officer in Washington, D.C., And I've been in that situation before where you're hands-on with somebody and they are grabbing, they're tugging, and where's your weapon? Where's your weapon? It's on your side. And you can see the suspect grabbing the officer and actually grabbing for a weapon. He gets hold of the taser. Now, do keep in mind, he could have gotten hold of the officer's gun, either one of those officers, but he gets hold of a taser. They're telling him, don't take the taser, don't take it. He takes it anyway. He gets up and he starts running. So you can imagine the adrenaline that's going through these officers, by their bodies. And then as he runs away, then he turns and he points the taser at them. I'm going to remind you that a taser looks an awful lot like a gun, by the way. And for those of you, because I've heard people say this, that they did a pat down on him and they determined that he did not have any weapons on him. Now, let me just stop there for a second. You would be surprised how many people you do a thorough search of, and what they did was anything but a thorough search of. But how many people you do a thorough search of, and I mean even in a jail setting, because I've worked as a corrections officer as well, and it is amazing how people can hide things. Even when you spend a great deal of time and you are professional and thorough, I have still seen things get into jails that would just absolutely amaze you. Now, if you look at the video, they did anything but a thorough search. It was just more of a pat down, or what we would call a frisk. Anything but thorough. So this argument that they knew that he did not have a weapon, that does not fly with me. That is not necessarily the case. So they don't know if it's a gun, but even with it being a taser, when he turned and he pointed that taser at the officer and fired it, you can hear the taser go off. Now, folks, do you know what happens when you're hit with a taser? Do you know what happens? It incapacitates you. When you're incapacitated and you're laying there, what is the officer carrying? A gun. That is a deadly force situation. And backing up, I will say that once you're in a fight with somebody and you go hands-on, meaning their body is on you, their hands are on you, what do you have on you? You have a gun. Therefore, the way that we look at it in law enforcement is, once you go hands-on with me, I consider us both armed because you're just as close to my gun as I am to my gun. And you have to remember that. And everybody receives that training. The training talks about this, no matter what agency you're in, that you don't go hands-on with somebody. And when you do, that is considered a deadly situation. And so that's what this officer was facing. So then he fires, and unfortunately the suspect dies in this case. Now, every training facility that I am familiar with in law enforcement in the United States today uses the following standard when it comes to the use of deadly force. And that is, I am authorized to use deadly force when your actions, in my opinion, may result in my death and or serious bodily injury. Your actions may result in my death and or serious bodily injury, or the death and or serious bodily injury of someone else. So that was the reasonable standard that this officer was having to apply to the situation. So if you look at the situation, it is reasonable to believe that that's what the officer felt he was facing. And what's important to realize here is that he is the one that makes that determination. Not you, not me, looking at the videotape weeks after the fact, years after the fact, transcripts, interviews, videotape, all kinds of different angles, and then make a decision. That is not the standard that is applied to the officer at the time. The standard that is applied is, was it reasonable to him at the time with the facts and circumstances that were presented to him at that time? You can't then go take a camera from a different angle and say, look, we've got this evidence. This guy was not armed, and we know that. Well, but that's not the information that the officer had at the time. So you have to remember that was the information that was presented to this officer. Now, what I'm seeing on a lot of social media, to include LinkedIn, and again, I don't know why this is on LinkedIn, but I'm seeing this, and that is, hey, well, why not just shoot the guy in the hand or shoot him in the leg? Just maim him. Why couldn't you have done that? Well, I'm going to tell you why you don't do that. Because, folks, this is not television. This is not a movie. This is not somebody, doing somersaults and shooting sideways and using all kinds of tactical lasers. That's not how it works. When you you're a law enforcement officer and you pull a weapon out of your holster, it means that you believe you are seeing something that is going to result, like I said, in your death and or serious bodily injury, or death or serious bodily injury to someone else. You're pulling it out. And then if you point that weapon at someone, you do not point a weapon at something that you are not intending to destroy. Stop the threat. If that is what you feel that you're facing, then you're pointing the weapon at that, whatever that threat is. And you aim for center mass. That's what you're trained to do. And why is that? Because the fact is that you feel that this is something that is going to result in your death or serious bodily injury. So if it's anything less than that, so if I don't feel like that's what's going to result in this altercation, then I'm going to use some other method. But once I go and I draw that weapon, then I feel as though that this is a life-threatening situation, and I'm going to stop the threat. Now, how many times do you fire? Until the threat is stopped, whatever that means. And the fact is, when you look at the statistics, when you look at 3 to 5 feet, which is in fact where most police shootings occur, is 3 to 5 feet, you oftentimes miss because of the adrenaline, because of a lot of different factors that are going on. So the idea that you are going to shoot someone's hand or shoot their leg and just maim them is ludicrous. Most shootings don't connect even when you're shooting for center mass. And if you're shooting for anything other than center mass, then you're really never going to hit anything. So the public doesn't understand that. And I just scratch my head and roll my eyes every time I hear somebody in the public say, well, you should have just maimed him, or you should have just shot his hand. Please, 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 unless you've worked in these situations, unless you've been through this training, unless you really understand what you're talking about, please don't enter into that discussion. You know, if an officer abuses someone, if an officer did something illegal or unethical, it will be discovered. It has to be found out in a thorough investigation, a professional investigation. And what concerns me about the Atlanta incident is within 24 hours, these guys were fired, arrested, the mayor apologized, the chief of police resigned, all within 24 hours. Now, I've done investigations for a very, very long time, and I'm telling you, I have never seen an investigation done and completed and action taken within 24 hours. That is not due process for anyone. And I'm really disturbed by what I'm seeing out there today. Really disturbed by it. Now, it may be that the investigation uncovers wrongdoing. It may be that the information is presented to a grand jury and these guys are indicted anyway. And I could be wrong about all of this. But for goodness sake, it has to be done after a thorough investigation. These guys are entitled to due process. They are not treated any differently than anyone else in the community when it comes to this regard. They have the right to be heard and to be questioned, and then to challenge the evidence. That is the system in which we live. That is the system that we want to have. But when I see these things happen, I sit and I ask myself, or is that really the system that people want these days? Or are we trying to fundamentally transform the entire system? And folks, if that's where we are headed, then you need to really, really be worried for the future of this country. When we have a system now that condemns police officers no matter what they do, then we are going to have real problems. And I have another concern for law enforcement too, and that is by the scrutiny that these officers are under and the standards that are applied, very unreasonable standards applied to these officers, you have to ask yourself, why in the hell would anybody go into law enforcement today? It is a very different world today. I got to ask myself that if I was starting over, if I could do everything over, would I go into law enforcement today under these conditions? And I have serious reservations about that. But that's not good either. That is really not good. Either we aren't going to have police forces, or you're not going to have the people that you want to be in police forces. And those are all very difficult discussions to have. But I'm very concerned, folks. I really am. And if you listen to me, I'm pretty much an upbeat guy. I look at the bright side, but I'm concerned about this. So I just wanted to put this recording out today, put it out to the public to help you understand from the law enforcement perspective how these things are looked at. I appreciate you listening to the show. Please go to the web and go to the Facebook site. If you disagree with me, agree with me, have any opinion, please put it on Facebook. Give us a like, give us a follow. And folks, we are going to see each other soon, or we're going to hear each other soon. Let's put it that way. And I look forward to it. And thanks again for listening to the Mark Vines podcast. See you soon.